Okay, today we're going to talk about tissues. So tissues are just a group of cells that perform a common function. A group of cells that perform a common function. They are, then you have your apical meristems, which are found in the vicinity of the tips of roots and in stems. The vascular cambium and the cork cambium occur lengthwise in cylinders within the roots and the stems. Your intercalary meristems occur in the vicinity of nodes of grasses and related plants. Okay, and this is just a really good drawing of the meristematic tissue. If you look at the very tip top, you will see where the apical meristem is, and if you look at the very bottom, you will see the root cap. And underneath the root cap is the apical meristem at the bottom on the root. This is a really good diagram. It's also in your book, and it shows the different layers from the procambium, the protoderm, the ground meristem, the roots, the vascular cambium, and you can see where the auxiliary buds are. So this is a longitudinal section, which is also a cross section there in the middle. The shoot is the top part and the root is the bottom. The tissues that are produced by the meristems consist of one to several different kinds of cells. These first three words are some of my favorite words in the entire English language: parenchyma, collenchyma, sclerenchyma. Then you have your epidermis, your xylem, your phloem, the periderm, and the secretory tissues. So your parenchyma cells are your thin-walled cells. So the slide or the diagram that's on the top is an example of a parenchyma cell. Notice how thin the cell walls are. The bottom picture is a collenchyma cell. So they've got unevenly thickened walls and they provide flexible support for various plant organs. So it's real easy to see that the top one has got thin cell walls, and then the next one they're thickened. So parenchyma on the top, collenchyma second. There are two types of sclerenchyma that occur. There are fibers, which are long and tapering, and then there are sclerids, which are short in length. And both types have thick walls, and they are usually dead at maturity. The picture on the left shows you a cross section, and then you've got a longitudinal section in B. And just follow where the lines by fibers go so you can see exactly in the middle of that cell. Those are long and tapering. This is just a cross section. If you look to the right, you would see where they are long. Okay, so let's compare all of those side by side. You've got your parenchyma, which you can see in the very bottom slide. Then you've got some collenchyma up to the right, which are a little bit thicker. And then you've got your sclerenchyma cells up here on the top with the very thickest. So complex tissues. Complex tissues have more than one kind of cell. So principal examples would be your xylem, your phloem, your epidermis, and your periderm. Xylem. Xylem is what conducts water and minerals throughout the plant. It consists of a combination of parenchyma cells, fibers, vessels, which are tubular channels, tracheids, which are cells with tapering end walls that overlap, and ray cells, which are involved in lateral conduction. So all of that is xylem. So remember that xylem conducts water and minerals throughout the plant. Okay, I just threw this diagram in to help you. On the left are your xylem, and on the right are the phloem cells. So you can see the vessels, the pits, the tracheids, and the vessel elements in the xylem. And over in the phloem, you can really locate the companion cells, the sieve plates, your sieve cells. Your phloem are going to be bigger than your xylem. Your storage cells and your sieve plate structure. This is just another slide. I wanted you to be able to see what the primary xylem and the primary phloem looks like on the left if you were looking at it underneath the microscope slide. And then on the right, you can actually see secondary xylem and then secondary phloem. So the epidermis, it's usually 1 cell thick. Which it has a fatty cutin, which is forming the cuticle within and on the surface of the outer wall. So the epidermis may include things like guard cells that border pairs called stomata, root hairs, which are tubular extensions of single cells, other hairs that consist of 1 to several cells, and glands that secrete protective services. So this is a cross section of just a leaf that you're looking at here. Okay, and your periderm consists of cork cells and loosely arranged groups of cells comprising lentils involved in gas exchange, and this constitutes the outer bark of woody plants. So on the left, and I know you guys have seen these because you've been out in the woods and you've seen twigs, these little spots that look like almost like little cuts, these are called lenticels. And if you look at that underneath a microscope, you can see where the periderm is. And this whole opening, this whole section here is called the lenticel. And see how that opens up? And that's where the gas exchange takes place. Your secretory tissues. This occurs in various places in your plants. So what they do is they secrete substances such as nectars, oils, mucilage, latex, and resin. What kind of plant can you think of that secretes something? Okay, let's just do a review of what I know you've already read in your book. Just go over a few key factors for this chapter. It's not a huge chapter, but if I ask you for an example of a meristematic tissue. Cork cambium could be one. A tissue derived from apical meristems. Protoderm. In grasses and related plants, intercalary meristems are found in the vicinity of what? The nodes. A location in I'm terrible at that word. Intercalary meristems can be found where? A location where they can be found, their meristems. That would be like at the base of the grass leaf. Primary tissues can be traced to their origin in, think about it, primary tissues, apical meristems. Actively dividing cells can be found where? Well, that's in your meristems. The primary activity of cells in meristematic tissue is what? What does meristematic tissue do? Well, that's all about cell division. And your lateral meristems, such as vascular cambium, produce tissues that increase the girth of the plant. That's what makes it grow out wider. Primary meristems produce tissues that increase what? They're not doing the girth, that's the lateral meristems, but the primary meristems are the ones that do the length of the plant. And groups of cells that have a similar structure or common function are called, it was the first slide here, tissues. And the tissue that has support as one of its primary functions is the parenchyma. Remember, it had the thickened walls. Which cell has a relatively thick cell wall? Well, that would be your sclerids. And parenchyma cells that develop irregular extensions of the cell wall that gracefully, Parenchyma cells that develop irregular extensions of the cell wall that greatly increase the surface area are called what? Those are called transfer cells. A type of sclerenchyma cell would be what? A fiber. A tissue composed of thin-walled cells with interconnecting air spaces between them is called aerenchyma. Think about the word air for spaces in there, except it's spelled A-E-R-E-N-C-H-Y-M-A. So it's a tissue composed of thin walled cells with interconnecting air spaces between them. It's called aerenchyma. Lignin is primarily found in sclerenchyma. And the tiny cavity at the center of a fiber and a stone cell is called a what? That tiny little cavity, the center of a fiber and a stone cell is called a lumen. And what function of parenchyma tissues provide strength? What is the function of parenchyma tissues? Well, that would be to provide strength to growing plants. And you would expect to find parenchyma cells in herbaceous stems just underneath the epidermis because you need that structure to hold things together. A parenchyma cell has thin primary cell walls, a large vacuole, and is living at maturity. Parenchyma are living at maturity. A sclerid has a thick and lignified cell wall. A sclerid is also a type of sclerenchyma cell. And when we do the lab, you will look at one of those. A parenchyma are your simple tissues that are comprised of a single type of cell. Phloem is a tissue that has sugar conduction as the primary function. So we basically look at phloem as feeding the plant. In woody dicots, the periderm eventually replaces what? What are on other plants? The epidermis. Guard cells are different from other epidermal cells in they have what? What do guard cells have that are different from other epidermal cells? Well, they have chloroplasts. And your fiber cells are commonly found in your xylem. And a primary function of tracheids is water conduction. So where would you see those? Well, you would see those in xylem because that's where the water conduction takes place. And the porous cell wall regions of food conducting cells are called sieve plates. And cell types found in the xylem of flowering plants include vessel elements, fibers, ray cells, and tracheids. Rays function primarily in lateral support. Conduction cells open at either end include vessel elements. And periderm is the tissue in which lenticels are formed from, periderm. The fatty substance in the wall of cork cells is suberin. And then we talked about the secretory cells. I hate that word. And that's where something gets secreted. I wish they would just say it that way. That's going to be your nectars, your oils, your mucilage, and your resins. Your epidermal cells include guard cells and the trichome, C-R-I-C-H-O-M-E. And a root hair is an underground epidermal cell that may have the exterior wall extended into a long, thin, thread-like structure. Sieve pores are what connect one sieve tube to another. And how are vessels and tracheids different? Well, your vessels have perforated end walls and your tracheids do not. Your woody tissues are produced by vascular cambium. Leaves and primary stems interface with the environment through the epidermal tissues. So the outside layer is where they interface with the environment. Okay, that should give you guys something to take notes on. Read your chapter, and then we'll answer any questions that you have.